Discover the Our MedTech Lives podcast, where industry experts share their career stories, key achievements, and insights into overcoming challenges in the MedTech field. Hosted by Zilko Rima and Kash Ikram.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Our MedTech Lives. Today, we're speaking with Dr. Gunter Trojandt, co-founder and managing director of Medical Decision Alliance. Medical Decision Alliance is a health tech startup based in Germany. The company is developing AI-based assistance systems designed to capture the decision-making process of expert surgeons and translate that into digital guidance tools for the operating room. Gunter is a serial healthcare entrepreneur who previously co-founded the Surgical Process Institute, which was acquired by no other than Johnson & Johnson in 2017. Today, with Medical Decision Alliance, or MDA, he is working on bringing surgical knowledge, AI, and workflow intelligence together to improve outcomes in the operating room. So, without further ado, welcome, Gunter.
Thanks for having me. Welcome.
Welcome, Gunter. Let's get to know you a little better. Tell us something about yourself, your background, and super interesting how you got into MedTech.
Sure. So thanks for having me, first of all. My name is Gunter. I'm a healthcare entrepreneur, if you want. So I'm for more than 30 years in healthcare. Actually, I'm a chemist by training. So my wish was for a long time to become a professor. I did my PhD in Munich, went to Columbia to do a postdoc in New York, and maybe met too many business people in New York. So I got very interested in business, and to switch from a more academic career towards business consulting is a good way. So I joined BCG, Boston Consulting Group in Munich, worked there for more than almost 10 years at BCG, mostly in the healthcare sector. So I did a lot of pharma, generics, MedTech, hospital. I moved then over to Novartis, worked in their generics branch as a head of strategic planning and M&A, and actually found out that I'm not a corporate guy. I didn't like it too much in the corporate environment. Start my first company. So meanwhile, I've started 5 companies, so one of which we sold to J&J, as Kash mentioned. All of my ventures, I focus on the operating theater. So that's the topic of my life, my business topic of my life, if you want. So decision-making during surgery, that's something that intrigues me. So privately, I live a little bit outside of Berlin with my family. I have 3 kids, and I'm a lucky fellow, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what problem in the operating room made you start Medical Decision Alliance and
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it top down from a broader perspective, I mean, surgery is an important topic in healthcare. So it's actually a critical moment in healthcare, and sometimes in our lives. Sometimes we all may lay on an operating table, but at the same time, quality still varies a lot. So the outcomes vary a lot. And the question is, why is that? And there are many different reasons, maybe, but I'd say that the knowledge, the surgical knowledge, the excellence is not scalable, right? So when you look at where excellence is, you find it, but you just find it in the minds of the experts. And surgery is still taught that you look at over someone's shoulder. So at the beginning, you're a beginner and look at over someone's experienced shoulder. And then if you're more advanced, you have a proctoring. So someone comes to you and spends a day with you. But I think that's a very inefficient way to teach. And it is different compared to other medical areas where everything is written down. So for example, pharma, when you want to look up what's the latest study on for that specific regime for that specific cancer patient, you find it. But in surgery, there's no database where you could say like, well, I would like to know everything you need to know about radical prostatectomy, and I like the Martini Clinic workflow style. So I'd like to have access to that knowledge, and they perform that procedure for the last 20 years. So they must know how it works. They do it 3,000 times a year for the last 20 years. I want to have access to that knowledge, and that doesn't exist. We're trying to create it. I believe that making that more accessible will lead to to better outcomes. And it will also, I guess, save money, because an efficient process, a good process, is always a cheaper process.
But I think you refer now to training, and I completely understand that this is possible today. But I think you go a step further to surgical decision making, right? How do you think this can be digitized, or is it already maybe?
Yeah, that's a big one. So the question is, how can you help a surgeon doing surgery? The way we do it, and there are different ways how you could do it. I mean, you could either do it top down, where you collect a lot of video data or other data and try to make sense out of it using an AI, or you do it like we do it, bottom up. And we like to do it bottom up because we believe there are different schools you shouldn't mix with each other. So I give you an example. For example, total knee arthroplasty, so a knee replacement. There are different platforms. So you have a Stryker Mako platform. You have a platform from Smith & Nephew, Corey. You have one from a ROSA platform from Zimmer Biomet. Then you have Velis. So there are different platforms. Some of them are CT based. You use a CT as a basis. Some others are gap balanced. And you have different implants. So you have a symmetric implant, asymmetric implant, you have a CR, you have a PS. You have different workflows. So you have a classical mechanical alignment where you cut the tibia 90 degrees and femur 90 degrees. You have kinematic alignments. You have a tibia first, you have a femur first, you have a reverse kinematic alignment. So there are 10, 15 different schools. Then you have different goals. If some people say, like, I want to have a balanced knee, all gaps equal in extension and flexion. Some others say, well, I want to have it laterally a little bit looser. And then at the end, you also have a patient, and you could have a patient with like a strong varus, a mild varus, a neutral, like a valgus. So the complexity is pretty big. And I think you have to meet the surgeon at that level. So if you want to support someone and just want to generalize it, it wouldn't work. But if you are able to do bottom up, go to the best clinics in the world, like we do it, we go to the best clinics in the world, and we establish a foundational model for a certain school, then you could use these data to make really interesting applications. And that's always first of all, always educational. So if you spend time, let's say 6 months, 12 months in a Martini clinic, and you record 1,000 videos how they perform a radical prostatectomy, you have a pretty huge database, and then you could annotate all the videos and you could segment it and say, like, well, I have an example of a patient with a large prostate, with a small prostate, with a tumor on the left, tumor on the right side. So we believe that is a requirement to develop that bottom up and to really understand the clinical pathway. And then the AI part, in terms of the architecture, it's not the most difficult part. The most difficult part is get access to good quality data.
And who's your target group? Is it the young surgeons, or would you say every age group is still open for it? Because we discovered sometimes that people just before they go for retirement, they say, I'm not starting this anymore. What is your experience?
Yeah, I mean, there's another trend in that is that surgery is becoming robotic, and that's for sure. So in all areas, you have robots, and you not only have to learn how the robot works itself, but you also want to learn how, the best surgeon in the world performs a TKA or a radical prostatectomy with that specific robot. So if you take that as an example, you would need to first understand how the best surgeon is performing a specific procedure. And then you would, first of all, develop a training solution based on that. But after you have that training solution, you would want to go one step further and not only train a surgeon on a certain ecosystem, so certain surgical cube, you would also want to measure whether he was compliant to that specific workflow. So that's the next step. So what you do is you actually build up an ecosystem. You start with training, you develop an ontology and a language. A new customer buys in, and then you go one step further. You say, like, well, where you're compliant. And the third step is then actually advise doing surgery. So in terms of customer groups, yeah, maybe one chief surgeon in a certain country says, like, well, I don't want to learn from the other chief surgeon. But if you go to other areas, let's say you go to Iraq, you go to Africa, you go to South America, they wouldn't even care whether this guy comes from France or from Germany. They want to have an established process. So there, even the senior guy who maybe comes from open surgery. So he didn't even go through laparoscopy. He used to do the radical prostatectomy in an open approach, and now moves to a robotic procedure. He wouldn't mind. So you have all kinds of groups, and I wouldn't even focus on Germany as a market. I mean, Germany is great as a market to collect content, so to find really good surgeons. But think about, I mean, we have 300 million procedures worldwide yearly. We have 3 billion that don't even have access to good quality surgery. And I think that's the future market. And there, it doesn't matter whether it's a young surgeon or an experienced surgeon. That's someone who buys into robotics, and he would be pleased to have the content of the Martini Clinic on his fingertips.
Fascinating. I really want to dig deeper into this, into the MDA and this technology you're developing. Before we do that, I'm also very curious about your previous company, Surgical Process Institute. So tell us what that did and how you managed to sell that to Johnson & Johnson.
Yeah. I mean, SPI, we started now almost 15 years ago. And we used the term digital surgery at that point of time. And everyone was like, oh, no, don't say that. Surgery is not digital. What SPI did, we developed checklists. So it's pretty similar to what we do now with MDA, but with MDA, we go much deeper and use AI. But with SPI, we developed checklists for the most relevant procedure. And then there's a so-called surgical procedure manager in the OR that announced the next step. It's like, well, cut the tibia, remove osteophytes, do this and do that. And that's helpful for younger surgeons. And I guess J&J included that into what they call a polyphonic platform. So what are my learnings from that? So first of all, I would say, like, even though you're a small company, you might be an attractive target for a bigger company, which is a good thing.
Yes.
Second, I would say, well, if you sell a company to a big company, I mean, help with the integration, but don't overstay. As I mentioned, so I'm not a corporate guy, and I think it becomes more than a marketing machine, and not so. I like very much to build something from scratch. So white sheet of paper, dark room. You have to find a way, like a scientist, like a chemist. You do that experiment for the first time. First person was doing that. That's what's nice and what I like. So I would say don't overstay. And third of all, there's always a problem to solve. So you can always start a new company, which is MDA now.
But you said this is your fifth company. So did you found this differently? Or was it still the same system because never change a successful system, right?
Yeah. I mean, a couple of thoughts. I mean, first of all, after your second or third company, you believe you know how it works, and know it goes faster, but it doesn't go faster. So that's one learning for sure. It always takes a long time because you establish the idea, then you go out, you try it out, and then you're disappointed that the other side doesn't understand what you mean. And then you work on your own stories, like, well, but maybe it's not them, it's me. I just tell the story wrong. What went wrong with my approach? So that iteration takes a while. And I was also kind of surprised that after I sold a company pretty successfully, when I go out and try to raise money, I thought it was like, it's like this, people will say, like, well, whatever you want, how much is it? Where's your bank account? No, it took me 12 months actually to raise a capital for MDA. So the first 4 million. Lucky enough that in Germany, we had long that gap of the really early phase, and no investor is willing to invest 1 million over 2. They're later happy to invest 5 millions, 10 millions when you have revenues. That's all good. But the first phase is very difficult. And they started an initiative in Germany a couple of 10 years ago, I guess, called HTDF, High Tech Founders Fund. And they really listened very carefully to our idea, which is not easy. I mean, if you're not, even though you might be MedTech, I mean, to focus on content and process development and AI, it's not an easy story to tell. And they took the effort and looked at it and did the due diligence and secured the first 1.5 million. Then what was easier, then the second investor saying, oh, HTDF joins then. And then I had a second fund from Saxonia, similar to HTDF. And then I have 5 further private investors, and then 4 million were there.
Sounds
was
daunting.
more difficult than I thought.
Yes, I'm sure. Yeah. And so what does the AI decision support actually mean for surgeons during a procedure? Can you add some
Yeah.
color to this for us?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's take again total knee arthroplasty. As mentioned, it is first of all complex. It's a high variability of components you need to understand: platform, implant, a patient workflow. But for all TKA procedures, I mean, there's always that moment. Yeah, they open the knee and they do the referencing of the knee depending on what kind of platform that they have, and then they're planning. So they look on a monitor. And then the surgeon says, "Hey, give me a little bit more virus on the tibia, do this on the femur, then give me a little bit more rotation." So it's kind of playing chess in the operating room, and an experienced person can do that pretty quickly. But that
Yes.
conceptual thinking, that's interesting to us because the whole skill training, how to saw and how to drill and all that stuff. I mean, there are good reference centers and good curriculums to teach that, but that chess playing, Rubik's Cube. How do you set up my system, the 15 different decisions I have to make in order to get a balanced knee at the end of the day? And as I said, that runs manually today based on our experience, but an AI could, based on a deep understanding of a certain school, can run that for you in the OR. They can even say, walk you step by step through the procedure and say, well, cut the tibia with 2, cut the femur with 3, put in 3 degrees of rotation. Or be careful, this is an Attuan implant. You have to be careful, that needs to be 5 degrees of slope instead of 3 degrees of slope. They could warn you, oh, be careful, you're notching. Be careful, you wouldn't reach your gaps if you cut that. And then at the end, you have a dashboard, if you want. Many companies collect analytical data, how you dialed in your different parameters, but few really evaluate it according to clinical considerations. Because you could say, like, well,
Yes.
what is important post-op? I want to know whether you kept the joint line, or did you cut the femur a little bit shorter, which you don't want? Did you
Yeah.
stay in your boundaries? Where the gaps at the end as you envisioned? And many other things. So, and that only works if you really understand the foundational model of the surgeon and his or her boundaries. But if you do, then you can say, like, well, then please be honest to your own rules, and I support you doing surgery to stay in that corridor.
Yeah. I started in ortho, so I've seen 200 plus knee replacements, and this was back in the day when it was all, let's say, analog, right? And you were really relying on the surgeon's skill in balancing those ligaments, figuring out the backward slope of the tibia so that the knee would glide properly. And if you get the balance wrong, you
Right.
put too much weight on one side, and the metal femur will wear through the plastic tibia and
Absolutely.
cause you more problems. So it really was, you were relying very much on the experience and, of course, surgeon knowledge of bell curve, right? Like most other things in life.
Absolutely.
But to this point, Cash, I mean, doesn't this change now? Because before the hierarchy was super clear, right? You had this super experienced surgeon, he's teaching the young surgeons. But with your system now, I think this can change. Is there also a political risk within the team that this is changing everything what you are doing?
Is it?
I'm not sure whether so many things will change. I mean, surgery is still a very conservative environment, my understanding. But if you see, question is, where do you find good surgery? Good surgery is, from my perspective, if you have a high volume surgeon doing few different procedures. That's where the excellence is. And these high throughput centers, that's a tough environment. That's a highly specialized environment. So imagine as a young person, you come into that environment, you just listen and you be careful. Sometimes you don't have the courage to ask stupid questions. So that's my role, actually. I'm a physician. I'm a chemist, so I can ask very stupid questions, and that's always. And if you have that kind of scientific understanding, you pick a language, and then you can have a good conversation with them.
I have a black belt in asking stupid questions.
Yeah, all right.
So Dan.
I think that I'm kind of a trustee for the young guys because I can ask that stupid question. They answer me that question. I can put that in the solution. And so the young guys didn't have to ask that stupid question. It will help them to adjust, but still, it is a long journey. It takes 10 plus years in a regular setting to come from good to great. And we hope that with the solutions we develop, it could be a video platform, it could be a post-op dashboard, it could be an intro-op advice system, will speed up that learning curve and will reduce risk. According to studies from the British Journal of Medicine, I think from 2024, 38% of the patients admitted for surgery experience somehow of adverse events. And many of them doing surgery and many of them preventable. So I think you can do a lot of good by asking stupid questions, put them into digital cubes, put them into learning platforms.
Yeah. Any system that reduces the variability between people who do this every day and are excellent and people who don't get to do it so much, that's really good. And if a tool like this enables to reduce that variability in a population of surgeons, that's great. And it's not always down to surgeon skill level. Like, you may be in a large city like London, and there's so many patients that you can just be doing primary knee replacements day in, day out. Right? Or if you're in a more rural area, your patient mix may be quite different. You could be doing a knee on one day, some femur repair on another day, a hip replacement in the afternoon, and therefore you end up doing less of each procedure. So any digital tool that can enable you to reduce that variability and have increased skills can only help. But then that beggars the question, Gunter, how do you capture the knowledge from these expert surgeons who are doing this day in, day out, like Martini Clinic with the vast volumes of prostatectomies that they do?
And that's exactly the reason why no one else is doing it. It is a lot of work.
Right.
So a lot of people building platforms by collecting data, for example, from telesurgery or from conferences, or from having a famous professor using that platform on a specific patient. That's interesting, but that's not what you need if you're a beginner. If you're a beginner, you want someone sitting on a chair saying like, well, my 25% that process is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I tell you some variations, and then I show you a couple of cases. Then we do some deep dives, and then we talk about trocar placement. Then we talk about lymphadenectomy, bladder neck reconstruction, and so on. And that doesn't exist because it is a lot of work. So you have to find, from a business perspective, a model so you can afford to spend so much time with the clinic. So quite practically, what we do is first of all, you need to find a suitable clinic. You go by recommendations or you have some analytics, but with the Martini Clinic, there was no doubt that this would be a good starting point. But meanwhile, we have 10 more clinics. Then you have to convince the surgeon and the team to open the trunk. So let me look inside how you do it. So not everyone allows you to do that. So that's kind of a skill you may learn in consulting or in sales. So you need to convince the surgeon to open the books. And then you set up contracts. You need a different contract with the physician than with the clinic. You need a specific patient consent that allows what you want to later do. So there's a lot of legal work before you even start. So after you've done the legal work, you need a specialized team that goes out, and that's mainly physicians. I have in my team going out and interviewing the physicians. So like, well, do you do it? What are the variations? What can happen? What kind of patient data do you look at? Pre-op and so on. Then you need a specific filming setup. And that could be if it's a soft tissue robotics, you just plug in your video recorder and audio device and you just collect the videos. And that's, from a filming perspective, rather simple for most of the parts. For the trocar placement, you have to set a film team filming in the operating theater, how they do trocar placement for different platforms, for an Intuitive, for Mako, for a Tumai, so it might be different. When you do a TKA, there's no camera. So you have to bring the whole camera set. And you do have to do the filming. Then you need to collect patient data. Then you have to sanitize all the materials. So you have to blur the videos, you have to sanitize the patient data in ranges so you can use it later. Then you need what we call a content factory, if you want. So it's a whole process from contractual to collecting content, classical videos, OR videos, patient data, anonymization of the data, annotation of the steps. So you develop a master workflow, then you have to annotate all the videos according to that master workflow. And you start, of course, to do that manually, having a bunch of more senior students doing that annotation for you. Based on the annotation, you develop an AI that does that automatically. So you automate your pipeline even further. Then it goes into an educational component where you need really classical filming post-production skills like color management and cutting and voice and all that stuff. And it goes into the AI pipeline to do more advanced face recognition, instrument recognition of how much energy they use during the surgery, and so on. So the question is, how can we afford just an effort and no one else is doing it? I think you have to really tailor your whole business model on it, because what we do is we go out for finding good content, but at the same time, I look at MedTech companies, which are my customers. So we run a pure B2B business model and say, would that content be interesting for you? It becomes a business model because I then collect content, I refine the content, I develop solutions on it, and I out-license it to the MedTech companies. And from those revenues, I give royalties back to the clinic. So just to do that on the side doesn't work from a skill perspective, but also not from a business plan or business model perspective. So
Right.
it needs to be a really consistent model.
Yeah. You're right. It sounds like a lot of work.
Gunter, we know from our experience when we talk to surgeons and also when we launched a cardiac robot, the feedback was always, I trust my intuition, my feelings, I need to feel it, I have my experience. How do you translate that into structured digital logic?
Yeah. There's always I mean, as we all know, there are two systems. A fast system, you do things intuitively when you drive your car. And then there's a slow system where when you do calculation. And I think a lot of surgery is running in system one. But when it comes in TKA to that point where people look at the monitor and say, give a little bit more varus here, a little bit more rotation there, that's not intuition. That is based on facts, MPTA, LDFA, HKA, you see in the X-ray and a specific anatomy of the patient, you make a conscious analytical decision. But you can have a bad day and maybe you do the wrong decision. So why wouldn't you use kind of an AI or kind of a specific tool just to confirm it? And, it is just an augmentation to the physician. It has the last call. He makes or she makes the last call. But there are things you can do to avoid mistakes. And I would say the surgeons I talk to, the high volume surgeons, they always welcome this approach, either for themselves because they say, like, I'll do so many procedures, I want to know how I perform, or they say, like, well, I have 10 other surgeons in my team, they're younger surgeons and they're changing. I want that they adapt my standard and I want to see it in facts. So I think a lot of the conceptual decision making in surgery is fact based and can be supported with an algorithm.
Yeah, and I think a few years ago, people would not really accept AI, but AI now is in so many parts of our lives in such a short space of time as well, right? It's become so standardized that now I think even in surgery, people are willing to accept AI analytics over intuition and experience, right?
Yeah. But you have to be careful with the AI because, I mean, as a language model, it works in a way that it's just like a prediction of the next token, of the next word. It doesn't work in surgery, and it doesn't also work to mix different styles. So that's why we do bottom up. So it's not the AI which is the miracle. It is the data. It's the surgeon which is the miracle. So
Yes.
if you have good data, you can develop very quickly a good model and a good algorithm. But if you have crappy data, you can do whatever you want with the best
Yes.
AI. It wouldn't help.
As the old adage goes, Okay. And then you have also, teacher, a proctor, like a virtual proctor, right? An AI proctor, a digital proctor. Can you walk us through how that works during surgery?
Yeah. Um, I mean, the whole idea is to set up an ecosystem
Mm-hmm.
best in class workflows. So you would start with education. And if we spend 6 months, 12 months with one clinic and develop a video based tool, that's the first step. And that's what we call a virtual proctor. So if you sell a robot, you could sell the robot plus the best radical prostatectomy workflow or hemicolectomy workflow or esophagus workflow or rectum or whatever you want, hysterectomy workflow video tool with that robot. And I think that's the first step. And with that, you bring your customer on your language and on your workflow understanding. And it doesn't matter whether they want to use the workflow from Professor Eckbergs from IKH or the Professor Ben's workflow from Böbling or now Tübingen. It just, they should choose one over the other, but then in the next step be consistent and be honest with their own boundaries. And that's the second step of the virtual proctor, that you then go in the clinic after the training tool and plug in a video recorder and a device, an inference device, and develop a dashboard. So post-op, they get a dashboard analytics that shows you, well, those were the 25 steps of your procedure, where you're compliant to your whole workflow, what were your times, how much clips did you send at the different steps. And maybe there is a rule, for example, at the Martini clinic, when you are close to the so-called Dennevis fascia, so the nerve bundle around the prostate, you shouldn't use energy anymore. No correlation, no monopolar or bipolar, or in particular, no monopolar energy. And you could see that on the dashboard. The younger surgeon didn't comply here, and you could have a discussion on why he or she did that. So the second point would be to measure really where you're compliant. And the third component is then that you, doing the surgery, give some advice because you really understand the master workflow, and you also start collecting additional data from all your installations. When you do the dashboards, you see pretty much every variation after a couple of years. And
Yes.
on these data, you can do an advice during surgery. Like, for example, the colleagues at Mantix, Orsi is working on really fantastic work from my perspective. And these kind of companies are also potential collaboration partners for us, because while Mantix really focus on having a great reference center and having the surgery at their hands because they have it on site in the also clinic, they might be interested in having different procedures they don't have at their hands there. So we could also become a data provider for these kind of innovative companies.
That's fascinating.
I think, Gunter, you mentioned several times that you started this business because the quality varies widely across hospitals, across surgeons, across doctors. I think after these 35 minutes, we all understood that your project helps to standardize surgical outcomes. But I'm still wondering, how fast do you think this will happen? Is this something which can be next year, or is it on a long-term horizon?
Well, we have to be careful with standardization. So what we don't want is to simplify surgery. Quite the opposite. So we want to have for every patient and every situation the best possible workflow, which might be different for different patients. And then you need to comply to the standard for that specific patient. But if you try to set up a system that supports surgeons, you need to capture the complexity of the world, of the patients, of the robotic systems, of the implant systems. So within one setting, it should be highly standardized and consistent, but you wouldn't do the same procedure for a valgus knee than for a valgus knee. So you need still be flexible. But if you are then consistent, you have a lot of positive effects. So first of all, you will see that your times go down of the surgery, and there are huge differences. I mean, one of the best surgeons in esophagus takes him probably 3.5 hours for the esophagus. If you're a beginner, it takes you 10 hours. And don't forget, 1 minute and you are 50 euros or plus. So there's a lot of savings potential. And look at Germany. We have the discussion currently going on. Look at the waiting lists. Good quality medicine is also a resource in a financial crisis. By having these standards, it will not only improve quality, it will also improve the economics, and that's needed. And that's something that will come either faster than slower, what is required faster than slower. I'm quite optimistic. Look at the US. Many surgeries go into the ambulatory care setting in the ASC, robotic getting adopted in the ASC. I think the skill level from the clinics that started robotics towards someone who is working in an ASC might be different. And they will need support. They will need this kind of virtual proctor support to see how a high volume clinic works. But I think that will come pretty quick.
Yeah, these daycare centers, right? So you come in, you're in and out on the same day with quite complex procedures that in the
Absolutely.
past you would stay a few days in hospital, right? And have some jello and ice cream. So what about so this all sounds fascinating, but I'm sure there must have been a lot of challenges, developing a deep technological business like this. I mean, obviously raising cash, you mentioned earlier, but, what other big challenges did you face, apart from hiring very good looking people?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest
Yeah.
challenges.
Yeah.
We can match the salaries from, for example, like a pharma company or a big
Right.
company. So we have attractive option programs, visa programs. So you have to be smart. Looking at the new generation that comes, I mean, I think that's an advantage for us because many people want to work remote. People want to do very, very flexible work settings, use very, very flexible work settings. With us, we go to the best clinics. So you have exposure. Let's say you are a young medical student, you just finish with your studies, and you have the chance to work with a very prestigious surgeon. That's pretty exciting. So we have to apply those soft skills to really excite people. But people is definitely a big topic. Timing is as a startup also a very tough thing because investors are used to faster turnarounds. And as we all know, I mean, selling a robot to a clinic takes 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. So that's not a time frame an investor would accept. It wouldn't be so much. I mean, it would be a bit faster in 5 years for us, but it's still a very conservative environment, and so it goes a little bit slower than in other industries. And in terms of financing, what we do is it's not pharma, it's not MedTech, it's content, but it's not like actually close to business models like Ambos. I don't know whether you know Ambos, which is one of the biggest content provider for students if you don't want to prepare for your exam, but they're forward integrated towards decision making of surgeons. So they have big deals with hospitals and outpatient clinics. So that's pretty much what we do, but not for the outpatient, but for theater. So that's a special segment, and you need to find investors that understand the dynamics of, for example, robotics, because at the end of the day, a robot hasn't have any intelligence currently, but with a system like ours, we can make the robot pretty smart. So the story is probably not the simplest one. So you need to find investors to buy into that story.
Yeah.
And I think, Gunter, you have a lot of stakeholders, right? You have the surgeon who's giving you the knowledge and all what you have to build into your system. Then you said your customer is a MedTech company, maybe, but then you also have the customers using all of this. So I think data must be a challenge as well. How do you address these regulatory and data privacy challenges?
Well, I mean, there was also for the last company or for all companies in MedTech. If you're not good in data, you shouldn't be in MedTech. So that's
True.
you know, as mentioned before, when I said we have to do contracts and we define patient consents in a way that we can apply to all use cases for later use, or if we blur videos, if we use patient data. So you have to be GDPR compliant, HIPAA compliant. You need a certain certification. So you spend a good amount of time with lawyers and data security officers and with compliance people. That's something you need to have in your DNA if you do it. I mean, I think that is one advantage of being in healthcare for quite some time. because that's a prerequisite. If you come from the outside and are used to everything is running in the cloud, come to the hospital, say, whoops, they're not allowed cloud. That's surprising, but it's not surprising to us.
Yeah, the only clouds are painted on the roof or on the ceiling of the radiology department.
Yeah.
Wow, excellent. So you're clearly a futurist, right? You're building the future of med device. You're not inventing a Me Too type product that everyone's been using for a decade. So you have an eye on what the future is going to look like. How do you think 10 years from now, how different will the operating room look?
Yeah, I don't believe that the autonomous robot like Elon Musk believes will come in 3 years at scale. No, that's not going to happen. It will come, probably not as a fully autonomous robot, but the future will be robotic. And I believe in the future, the robots we have will be intelligent robots. So the next wave will, hardware is complicated and Steve Bell, I like his podcast and his all his interviews, and that's a difficult word, no question, regulatory wise, but also from an engineering perspective. That will stay. But I think the next big wave will be intelligence. So make the robot more intelligent. So in 10 years, we will have very smart robots. They will guide you through a procedure and they will help you with all decisions. They will never overrule you. They will ask you, they will augment you, but they will not allow you to do big mistakes. So they would not allow you to use energy when you shouldn't use energy. So it would just turn off the coagulation device.
Yes.
And I would even go so far that some of the steps, and particularly in the bone medicine, some particular steps will be done autonomously by robots. So if you calibrate your patient, your knee, you know where it is in the 3D room, I think much of the cutting will be done autonomously. But the thinking, the thinking will always be done by, I hope. So I wouldn't enter an airplane if there's just a computer sitting in the cockpit. So I would always be happy to have someone human.
100%. That's the thing. And I think in addition to that, I think there's going to be larger screens. Maybe the walls turn into screens which are, I've got some AI giving you indications of what to look at, some high images pointing stuff out to you, much like the maps you have on your car these days, right? That appear on your dashboard, giving you indications. Yeah. Automation is one of them. And maybe, other experts that you are utilizing are not necessarily in the room, but dialing in from other places, the way the three of us are in 3 different places right now, in 3 different countries even. We're all having this shared conversation. Well, can 3 of us be having to be performing a shared procedure together?
Absolutely. Telesurgery has a big future, I believe. You could have been having like a center where the surgeons come in the morning, but they don't wear clothing from the OR. So they have just no means and go to the console, and they are check into different ORs worldwide doing so.
I think the OR of the future is going to be amazing. More information, some automation. The surgeon is not a single gladiator standing by the side of the table by himself anymore, but he has access. He can phone a friend. He has people overlooking, and as well as digital AI tools that you're building to help him through the procedure. I think that's incredible.
Gunter, people who have been following us for a while know our final questions to all of our interviewees. And we are curious to have your answer. So here is the question. What are the 3 things you know now that you wish you had known then? And then could be when you were a child, just before this podcast, whatever you choose.
Well, first of all, I would say I wasn't surprised too much because I've done it before, and I knew what's going to come. But I was surprised, as mentioned, that it will take longer to get the right financing together, although you were successful before. So that takes time. Maybe as a third point, building company. It's like I sold MDA, I sold SPI almost 10 years ago, and it took me another 10 years to build something new. So it takes quite some time and effort to build something from scratch. But actually, What hasn't changed, and I was afraid that it could get boring, and I was like, no, I was totally wrong. It never gets boring. It's always exciting, and I'm a lucky fella, and that's my biggest luxury, that I'm able to do that stuff. Work with talented people, work with young people, being in the unknown, be the chemist again. Do that experiment for first time. That really breaks me up in the morning. That's exciting.
Fantastic. Fantastic. How do we describe you, Gunter? I mean, you're a serial entrepreneur, you're a futurist, you're essentially going to redefine how medicine is practiced in the future in the OR. It's absolutely incredible what you're doing. It's exciting to talk to someone like you, and you're still young. You're still a young, sprightly guy.
Let's start kickboxing again. And when I do kickboxing session, I can tell you I'm not young anymore. I took this.
That is unbelievable that you could do that and fit that in as well as doing all this. And this area of medicine, which is developing so fast and is so exciting, is really going to pay a lot of dividends in a lot of areas and help democratize healthcare across the world. So, a lot of wind to your sails. We wish you great success.
Thank you.
And we thank you once again for spending some time today and helping us understand what the future is going to look like.
All right. Thanks, guys. So it was fun talking to you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning into our MedTech Lives. You have been listening to Zilka Riemer and Kash Ikran. We're committed to bringing you insights and stories that inspire and inform the medical community. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network.